With all these resin castings, probably the first thing you want to do is just check all the edges, and using a sanding block and a little sandpaper, clean up any flash, any kind of protruding resin that will get in your way. It's on the bottom of this. That feels pretty good, but I'll just take a little swipe with sandpaper just to make sure there's no stray pieces of resin. Do this resin casting cleanup with all your resin pieces. In your kit, you will find 2 long pieces of resin egg and dart molding. My piece of molding happens to be cut, but it will still be useful for the demonstration. You must determine which is the outer edge of this molding. This flat is the outer edge. As you can see, it's also the tallest part of the molding. This is important in cutting your miters. The first thing we want to do with the long piece is to cut a 45-degree miter on each end of the piece. We'll have one miter on this side going this direction, starting from the high point or the outer point and dropping down that way. On the other side, we will cut an opposite 45, starting once again at the outer edge, the high point, and mitering this direction. The purpose of these cuts are strictly for fitting the miters that will happen next on this model. Later on in the process, these miters we cut here will be cut away. They'll be insignificant, and we will use these pieces for future pieces on the model. Take one of the pieces of egg and dart molding and cut a 45 on the end. And you'll find this cuts a lot easier than the cherry wood, but the same rule applies. Just take your time, go slowly, nice even strokes. Now we're cutting the miter at the opposite end of that piece. This egg and dart molding, the rounded part is the egg, the pointy part is the dart. We designed this molding so you'd have a nice symmetrical miter on either end of the marble. So to accomplish this, we're putting the molding just overhanging a bit on the left, and we're visually lining up a dart, and we're visually lining up the dart on this side, they're too far that way. You just want to get this piece centered. And when you're satisfied with that, you can make a pencil mark on either side. This line is going to represent the bottom of the miter. Again, you can do your little cheater mark there. That's the direction I want the miter to go. Same there. But the key mark is right here. This would be the bottom of the miter. So we'll do the one on the left first. This miter box that I have has a ribbed floor, which is not very conducive to holding the piece flat. So this piece of resin molding rocks in there. So I put just a piece of scrap wood to make a new floor. I set my saw over the pencil mark and start cutting. And I don't want the saw going like this. I want to kind of hug the side of the miter box. And once again, just take your time and let the saw do the work. One of the more important things too is a lot of pressure with your fingers pushing that piece of molding against the back wall, the miter box. If you're holding on too loosely, it's going to slide around. Okay, you may wonder why we started with this top piece of molding. A general rule of thumb with any kind of trim work is always cut your longest pieces first. That way, if you make a mistake on that cut, hopefully you can use that for a shorter piece. So, as you can see, we did cut that miter on this long strip of wood. That piece we originally cut the miter on both ends. This is going to be used to check the fit. It's also going to be used to determine the location of this piece. So left to your eye, you wouldn't want to glue it here, you wouldn't want to glue it here. So this guy is going to make a nice joint there. Now, with that in place, you can go back to this side and check your pencil mark that you originally made and say, that's exactly where we want it. So this miter will be cut on that mark. Our 45 will come right in here. And it's just going to touch that pencil mark. If you can see, the saw is on the piece of molding, and we're actually going to make that cut and just touch the very side. We're going to save the line, they say. We're going to save the line. Now, with the slop in the miter box, you can see, look at the discrepancy you see here. That miter can be off, quite a bit. So we're going to favor one side of the miter box. We've got a lot of pressure clamping on, and sometimes I've clamped wood to the fence of the miter box. You really hold on and start the cut. And you can see we're going to just barely touch that line. And again, I don't want the saw to rock over this way. I want to favor my left-hand side of it. We're going to check the fit with our test piece. Go back to the other side. And that one looks a little long. So this resin is very forgiving. That's too small amount to take off with the saw. If you have a table saw, that'll make quick work of it. But this can be taken down with a file, with sandpaper, sanding block. And now we're sanding lightly, reducing the size of this piece. And then we'll check the fit once again. And there we have it. Now it's time to glue this first piece of molding. Some of these resin castings, the backside is a little concave. That's why I like this glue, because it will fill those gaps. We're going to set it in place, transfer glue. It seems like it's sticking. We got a very good transfer there. Now, this time I chose not to put the CA glue because there's going to be a lot of back and forth adjusting. And I don't want this to set up too fast. So I like it on the left. And this is good. It seems to be a fairly good fit there. So hold that in place. Magic tool will clean up the excess glue. Now I'm satisfied this is the position I want this. Now I will take some of the CA glue, just a couple drops, to hold this piece in place until the Loctite sets up. I'll start here. Capillary action will draw that glue into the behind the piece. This piece is going to get covered by the freeze panel, so it doesn't matter if there's some glue up there. So I'll hold this in place. Then, in our next segment, we will move on to the next two pieces.